The Dragon Brotherhood, Sons of the Last Dragon. Chapter 1 Dash. The Broken Shield. Snow fell in heavy silence over the battlefield. The storm had swallowed the cries of the dying, leaving only the crack of burning timbers and the iron stink of blood. Once, this valley had roared with the clash of two great armies. Now it lay still, blanketed in white and red. The Empire's banners flapped in the wind, their spears planted deep among the bodies of the fallen. 9 men staggered through the wreckage. Their shields were splintered, their mail torn, their faces blackened with soot. They were the last splinters of a broken shield wall, men who should have died with their brothers, yet somehow had not. Eric Ironhand led them, his eyes hard beneath his dented helm. Blood dripped from a cut along his cheek, but his step was steady. He had commanded thousands that morning. By dusk, only 9 followed him. Bjorn Bearbreaker lumbered at his side, dragging a chipped axe behind him. His breath steamed like smoke from a forge. "By the gods, Eirik," he muttered, "we are ghosts. Better to turn and die well than wander the snows like beaten dogs." "We live," Eric answered, voice hoarse but firm. "And while we live, our people still have hope. The city may yet need us." Skald the Wise lifted his gaze to the pale sky as though reading words written in the clouds. His cloak was torn, but his mind still sharp. "Hope is a thin shield against an empire," he said softly. "But hope is what keeps men walking when their bellies are empty. We walk." The others trudged in silence. Rurik Flameye's stare burned with strange fire, as if the storm itself whispered to him. Kjell the Outcast scouted ahead with a bow still slung over his shoulder, muttering curses at the cold. Sten Stoneborn leaned on the haft of his hammer, steps slow but unyielding. Torvald the Stag, youngest of them all, limped with a spear in hand, his face pale, but eyes fierce. Ulfr Bloodfang marched like a wolf too stubborn to die, his scars red against his frost-bitten skin. And Leaf Stormborn, ever restless, kept glancing to the ridges, calculating escape like a sailor measuring the tide. Behind them lay ruin. Before them stretched mountains, jagged and cruel. "The pass," Eric said, pointing north where the peaks closed like teeth. "If we can climb, we can lose them." "Lose them?" Ulfr growled, spitting blood into the snow. "The Empire does not lose. They hunt until the trail grows cold, and then they hunt still more." As if to prove him right, a horn wailed across the valley. Dark figures moved along the ridges, their torches glowing like eyes in the storm. Enemy scouts. The 9 were not free yet. "Then we climb faster," Eric said. They pressed onward, boots crunching in snow, lungs burning in the thin air. The mountains loomed above them, vast and indifferent. Once, men had sung of gods who walked among the peaks. Now it seemed only the wind remained, howling through broken stone. Hours dragged. Hunger gnawed. Torvald stumbled, nearly falling into the drifts. Bjorn caught him by the arm, growling, "On your feet, pup." "I have no strength left," Torvald whispered. "Then borrow mine," Bjorn snapped, dragging him forward. "If we die as 9, not 8. The words lit a fire in the others. They pulled Torvald between them and marched on, step after step, until at last they found a hollow in the cliffs. A dark wound in the stone, half hidden by snow and ice. "A cave," Kjell said, voice sharp with relief. Inside, the air was still and bitterly cold. Frost glittered on the walls like crystal, They stumbled into the dark, collapsing against the rock. For the first time since morning, no spears pursued them. Eric sank to one knee, planting his sword in the ice. "Here we rest," he said. "If the gods mean for us to die, let it be with steel in our hands." But Rurik Flameye was staring deeper into the cavern. His eyes caught a shimmer beyond the frost, a shape too vast to be stone. "No," he murmured, voice trembling. "This place is not death. This is something else." They followed his gaze. At first, it seemed only a wall of ice, fractured and gleaming. But as their eyes adjusted, the shape grew clear. A horn, vast as a man's arm, curved through the blue frost. Then scales, layered like iron plates, and deeper still, the jagged silhouette of a wing. A hush fell over the nine. Bjorn dropped his axe, his voice little more than a whisper. "By the All-Father, it's a beast." "Not just a beast," Skald said, awe in his voice. "A dragon." The storm outside howled like a chorus of wolves, but inside the cavern all was still. The 9 men stood before the wall of ice, staring at the ancient creature entombed within. Its massive skull rested against the stone, fangs jutting like spears. Its eyes, long closed, were deep hollows that seemed to drink the torchlight. "The last of its kind," Rurik whispered, trembling, "and we have found it." Silence held them. The Empire thought the 9 were finished. The gods had abandoned them, or so it seemed. But here, in the heart of the mountain, lay something greater than any empire, a relic of fire and sky, preserved through centuries of snow. Eric raised his hand, laying it against the cold wall of ice. His breath steamed in the air. "Brothers," he said, voice low but firm, "this is no accident. We are not meant to die tonight." And though hunger gnawed, and the storm raged, and the enemy prowled the ridges outside, a spark had been lit in their hearts. For the 9 had found the last dragon. Chapter 2. Into the Frost. The cave swallowed their breath and gave back only the slow crackle of frost. They dared not make a big fire. Smoke would betray them. Instead, Sten coaxed a stingy flame from damp driftwood Kjell had scavenged from an old cart half buried outside. The fire was little more than a glowing coal in a nest of stone, but even that small light drove the cold from their knuckles enough to move. Eric set 2 men to watch the mouth of the cave, Leif and Kjell, the swift ones, and the rest he gathered by the wall of ice. There the frozen colossus waited, all horn and wing and shadow, its presence larger than the cavern itself. The dragon's skull, trapped in blue, seemed to lean toward them as if listening. "We need water," Ulfr said, breaking a crust of rime from his beard, "and meat, if the gods are kind. The mountain is stingy." "The mountain is not our enemy," Skald murmured. "It is a judge. Then may it judge us quickly," Bjorn grunted, eyeing the shimmering wall. "I've eaten my last leather strap." Sten set his hammer's head against the ice, feeling its song with his palm. "It's layered," he said, eyes narrowing, winter upon winter. "We'll lose days if we hack blind." "We don't have days," Eric said. He looked to Rurik, who stood a pace apart, gaze fixed on the pale shape of the dragon's chest. "You see omens in smoke and snow. See them here." Rurik's eyes shone in the fire's faint glow, not bright, but alive in a way that made the others uneasy. He did not touch the ice at first. He breathed on it. Steam bloomed and then froze again, a thin rime of breath over ancient winter. He placed his palm where his breath had touched and whispered words in a tongue older than their mother's songs. "What do you ask it?" Torvald whispered. "To remember," Rurik said. "Even stone remembers." They worked. Sten showed them where the ice seemed webbed with tiny cracks. Ulfr used the blunt of his axe to thud a rhythm into it. Bjorn swung with a patience that surprised them all. Skald sang softly to keep the muscles steady and the mind from wandering, a sailor's cadence learned from Leif. Keep the strokes even, keep the breath easy, keep the fear in your teeth so it does not bite your heart. Time flattened. Snow hissed outside. Once, a horn called far off and low, and the 9 froze as if turned to the same ice they struck. No torches flared at the mouth of the cave. No boots scraped stone. The horn sank into the storm again and was gone. They struck. They paused. They listened. They struck again. The ice fought back with needles of cold that slipped under mail and stabbed the marrow. Their fingers numbed. Their bellies burned, empty and sullen. Eric accounted their strength in the quiet between blows. Torvald shook. Leif returned with a pouch of pine tar and a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Tracks on the ridge," Leif said. 3 men, scouts or hunters. Either way, they don't want this storm any more than we do. "Good," Eric said. "Let them hate the mountain. Let the mountain hate them back." Kjell slid in, silent as fox shadow. "I laid a false trail to the east with my own boots. If they follow sign, they'll follow ghosts. But if they have dogs, we fight them with knives and break our teeth on their bones," Bjorn said, which earned him a sharp look from Eric and a raspy laugh from Ulfr. Rurik set his ear to the ice again. "Here," he whispered at last, "the chest. The ribs hold what the years could not rot. Strike where the ice is blue as the sky after storm." Sten nodded. "Hollow beneath. If we can breach the shell there, we make a pocket. We can warm the water from the melt and drink it." "Drink it?" Torvald asked, half hopeful, half afraid. "Water is water," Steen said, "whether it fell as snow last night or 100 winters ago." They set to with renewed purpose. They alternated so that no arm failed completely. When Bjorn tired, Torvald took his place, and when Torvald's breath ran thin, Ulfr took the weight like a man lifting a fallen friend. Sten guided the rhythm. Skald's voice rose, raw but steady. "Stone for the shield wall, ice for the vein. 9 men hammer, 9 men remain. Cold is a judge, and hunger a fire. Beat through the winter, find the heart's wire." By the time the words faded, a pane of ice the size of a shield spidered with cracks. Steen pressed his thumb to it and felt the frost whisper through to his bone. "One more." "Make it count," Eric said. Bjorn rolled his shoulder and lifted his axe. "I will make it sing." He made it sing. The blow landed square and heavy, a deep bell tone echoing through the cave. The pane gave with a groan like a tree in storm and fell inward in a glitter of shards. Cold rushed out like a breath from a tomb. They did not cheer. They stared. Behind the breach lay a chamber of ice like the inside of a pearl, slick and glistening. What they had thought only shadow resolved into shapes. Curved ribs like the beams of a great hall, and between them a mass wrapped in frost that drank the faint firelight and gave it back as a sick red glow. "The heart," Rurik said, voice almost tender. "By all that walks and does not, the heart." It was huge, larger than a man's torso, encased in clear ice that had sealed in the last color of its blood. It did not move. It did not beat. Yet something about it felt awake, the way a spear feels awake in a warrior's hand, even when held still. Eric put out his hand to stop Torvald, who had stepped forward without realizing. "Wait. We can't take it out whole," Sten said after a long breath. "We must chip a channel, widen the breach. If we hurry, we will shatter it. If we shatter it, we lose what we do not yet understand." "What is there to understand?" Ulfr rumbled. "It is meat. It is blood turned to glass. We can melt it for water, and maybe we can feed." "No," Skald said, but gently. "Not maybe. We will feed if we choose it. And if we choose it, we choose more than meat." Rurik lowered to one knee and touched 2 fingers to the rim of the broken ice. In the old tales, men who ate the heart of the wolf ran as wolves. Men who sipped the blood of the bear became as the bear. Men who tasted dragon fire. He let the words hang. "Burned," Shell said dryly. "Or became something empires cannot name," Rurik answered. Hunger made its own argument, a twisting, undeniable voice in the gut. Torvald swayed a little, and Bjorn steadied him with a hand on his shoulder. "I will not watch the boy die," Bjorn said. "Not when the gods set an ox before us." Leif glanced toward the cave mouth. The storm thickened. Night crept down the mountain like ink. "If we do this, we do it now. Scouts or no scouts. Morning will be colder, and I would not fight with a fist of ice for a heart." Eric's jaw worked as he weighed the silence. Commander without an army, father without a hearth. He looked at each of them in turn. Ulfr's scars, Sten's steady hands, Rurik's pale fire, Skald's knowing eyes, Leif's restless grin, Kjell's fox-thin patience, Bjorn's blunt certainty, Torvald's raw hope. The 9 were more than names. They were the last weight he could not set down. "We will not be carrion thieves," he said at last. "Not butchers. We take only what we must, and we give what we can." "What can we give a dead dragon?" Kjell asked. "Honor," Eric said, "and the promise that if we live by its heart, we will live like men, not monsters." He drew his knife, not the sword that had killed and broken all day, but the small blade his father had given him when he was a boy. He pressed the tip to the ice near the heart and looked to Sten. "Guide me." Sten breathed deep and set his big hands on Eirik's, showing him where to score, where to wait, where to let the frost speak. Bjorn and Ulfr braced the edges. Rurik whispered to the stone, if stone could be called to witness. Skald took up a low hum, a note like the drone of a great horn that never quite sounded. Leif's eyes flicked between the work and the mouth of the cave. Kjell vanished into the shadows and came back with a handful of resin that would burn long and blue when they needed it. They made a channel, thin as a reed at first, then the width of a knife. Meltwater trickled, tasting of iron and old storms. Torvald dipped a fingertip and touched it to his tongue, eyes closing. "Like blood," he whispered, "but colder, older." "Do not drink yet," Eric said, and Torvald blushed, nodding. The channel widened. The heart behind the ice glimmered like ember under ash. It did not beat. It did not move. And yet, when the last of the outer frost slid away, and the membrane itself lay revealed, a murmur passed through the 9 that none could wholly explain. It was not a sound. It was not a light. It was a pressure, a remembrance, a wordless weight that settled on the tongue and in the chest. Hunger flared. but so did something like awe and fear, and a strange joy that tasted of winter skies and the first breath after drowning. Eric set his palm to the ice one final time. "If we live by you, we will guard those who cannot guard themselves," he said softly. "We will take only what we must. We will carry your name in deeds, not in boasting." Outside, the wind rose like a chorus. Somewhere on the ridge, a horn answered. Nearer now, or perhaps only the storm's lie. Leif's hand tightened on his sword hilt. Kjell's bowstring whispered. Sten lifted his hammer for the last strike. "Ready!" "Ready," Eric said. The hammer fell. The ice around the heart cracked in a perfect ring, and the sound that rolled through the cave was not entirely the sound of breaking. For an instant only, a breath, a blink, each man felt a thud inside his chest that was not his own. Ulfr sucked in air as if he'd been struck. Torvald's eyes flew wide. Bjorn's grip crushed the haft of his axe. Rurik shivered, teeth bared in a smile that was not joy. "The heart," Skald whispered, voice hoarse with wonder. It remembered. They stared at the dark, gleaming mass, now free but for a thin skin of ancient frost. Water ran in thin red threads, steaming in the cold. Somewhere out in the storm, the horn called again, closer. The mountain judged and did not speak. "Eirik!" Leif hissed, eyes on the cave mouth. Eric did not turn. His hand hovered over the heart, trembling not from cold now, but from choice. He looked to his brothers, and they looked back. 9 men on the knife edge between honor and hunger, legend and death. "Tomorrow," Skald had sung, "is earned by the brave." "Tonight," Eric said, voice low and steady, "we earn it." He set the knife to the membrane, and the frost skin parted like old silk. The scent that rose was not rot, but rain on iron and ash after fire. The 9 leaned in as one, breath ghosting in the dark, the storm howling at their backs, the dragon's last gift before them, and the heart, black-red as banked coals, beat once, or seemed to. Chapter 3. Heart of Desperation. The heart steamed in the cold like a forge left burning under snow. Its surface shimmered black-red, wet with threads of ancient blood that hissed when they struck the ice floor. The 9 men stood ringed around it, weapons forgotten at their sides, hunger gnawing, awe choking their throats. Bjorn was the first to break the silence. His laugh was low, bitter, almost mad. "Well, brothers, here lies a feast fit for gods or monsters. Which are we?" "No gods," Ulfr growled, kneeling stiffly with his scars pale in the firelight. "Not any more. But monsters? Aye, perhaps." Eric's hand still hovered over the steaming flesh. He looked at his men, seeing in their hollow faces the shadow of choice. To starve was certain death. To eat was an unknown road, one that might damn them or crown them. Skald's voice, soft as snow, cut through the silence. In the old sagas, men who ate the heart of beasts took on their nature. The wolf gave fury, the bear gave strength, the serpent gave cunning, and the dragon— His words faltered, as though the air itself weighed against him. The dragon was said to give fire, fire to consume the world. Rurik Flameye's gaze blazed. "Then better we burn the world than freeze in this cave like forgotten bones." He reached forward, knife in hand, and carved a thick slice from the heart. The blade sizzled as it cut, steam rising in curls that smelled of smoke and iron. He lifted the chunk, dripping red, and raised it to his lips. "If fate brings us here, Let us not spit on its gift." Eric caught his wrist. For a long moment the two locked eyes, the commander and the seer. Around them the others leaned forward, torn between revulsion and desire. At last Eric nodded. "We eat," he said, "but together. No man takes more than another. We share this burden as one." Rurik's grin was sharp as frostbite. He tore the flesh with his teeth and swallowed, eyes flaring like embers in the dark. He did not fall. He did not scream. He only exhaled long and low, and for an instant the breath curled red as sparks. The others did not wait after that. Hunger drove them, and something deeper, a pull in the blood, a voice in the marrow. One by one they cut their share. Bjorn tore his portion like a starving wolf, red staining his beard. Torvald hesitated, lips trembling, until Ulfr pressed a hand to his shoulder. "Eat, boy," the veteran said. "If you fall, fall with us." So Torvald ate, and the fire took root in him as it had in the rest. The taste was unlike anything they had known, bitter as iron, sweet as honey, sharp as smoke. It burned the throat and set the belly alight, as though they had swallowed molten steel. They coughed, gasped, doubled over, their bodies seizing under the weight of it. Then the change came. Their hearts thundered in unison, each beat echoing the cavern like the boom of drums. Blood surged through veins like rivers breaking their banks. Muscles swelled, bones groaned, old wounds knit together with a heat that made them cry out in half pain, half ecstasy. Their eyes burned, some red, some gold, some pale as frost. And in each the reflection of flame danced. Sten fell to his knees, clutching the dragon-tooth hammer at his belt. Sparks leapt across its head, though no forge lay near. Leif staggered, laughing wildly, his teeth sharp in the torchlight. Kjell hissed and flexed his bow hand, the string quivering, though no arrow was nocked. Skald's voice rose without his willing it, chanting words in the old tongue that none had taught him. And Bjorn roared, a bellow so deep the ice itself trembled. The cavern shook. Snow fell from the ceiling in powdery waves. The dragon's skull, frozen in the wall, seemed to leer with sudden life. For a heartbeat, the 9 men felt not alone, but watched, as if the dead beast itself weighed their worth. Then silence, broken only by panting breath. Eric rose first. His hand clenched his sword, and the leather grip smoked where his fingers touched. He looked at his men, his brothers, each transformed, each alive where they should be dead. "We are no longer what we were," he said, voice raw. "We are bound by fire now, the dragon's fire, and with it comes oath." He drove his sword point into the floor of the cavern. "By this gift we swear, never to turn this power to cruelty, never to raise it against the innocent. While breath remains in our lungs, we fight for our people, and we fight together." One by one, the others followed. Bjorn slammed his axe beside the sword. Sten pressed his hammer's head into the stone. Kjell set his bow, Leif his curved blade, Skald his spear, Ulfr his axe, Rurik his runed dagger, Torvald his shining sword. The 9 weapons formed a circle around the dragon's heart, gleaming in the firelight. Skald spoke then, his voice carrying with the weight of the old sagas. "From this night, let the world remember. 9 men entered the mountain, hollow and hunted. 9 sons left, forged by the heart of the last dragon. Brothers in blood, brothers in fire, brothers until the end of days." Their weapons pulsed faintly. Runes etched by Sten glowing with a light that seemed to come from within the very steel. The air thrummed with power. They feasted on what little more they dared, and when they had strength again, they wrapped the heart in frost and buried it beneath stone, leaving offerings of steel and bone. They took the scales, the teeth, the claws, and at last the massive skull, binding it with ropes. But they did not strip the beast bare. They left what they could, honoring the dragon as more than meat, more than armor. Bjorn spat into the fire when the work was done. We live because it died. Let no man forget that. And let no empire forget what it made us, Eric said. He placed his hand on the skull's brow, feeling the faint heat still burning in his blood. Come dawn, we descend. We carry this gift to our people, and the empire that thought us dead will find the mountain gave us back. The 9 gathered around the fire one last time. Their shadows stretched tall across the cavern walls, monstrous and noble both. Outside, the storm howled. Inside, their hearts beat like war drums. The Dragon Brotherhood was born. Chapter 4 Sons of the Last Dragon. The storm had not relented by dawn. Snow whirled down the mountainside in thick curtains, biting the skin like knives. The 9 bound the dragon's skull with ropes of sinew and rawhide, their makeshift sled creaking as it took the weight. Behind it, they lashed bundles of scales, claws, and bones, each wrapped in hides torn from the dead of the battlefield. What they could not carry, they buried deep in stone, marking the cairn with runes cut by Sten's hammer. They stood around the burial mound in silence. No prayer came from their lips, yet all felt the same weight in their chests. "We are alive because it is not," Bjorn muttered, voice rough as gravel. "That debt cannot be repaid." "It can," Eric said firmly, "with what we build of it. Let the skull watch over us, and let the scales guard our kin. That will be our offering." They set their shoulders to the ropes, and the descent began. At first, it was like dragging a fortress down the cliffside. The skull's eye sockets caught the wind like sails, and the sled groaned against the stone. Torvald slipped more than once, his legs weak from hunger still gnawing at him. But Ulfr was always there to grip his arm, steady as an oak. "Lean into the slope," the veteran barked. "Don't fight it. Let the mountain think you belong here." Leif laughed bitterly against the wind. "The mountain will never think that. But maybe it will think twice before killing 9 men with fire in their veins." Hours turned to aching stretches of ice and rock. Yet something had changed. Where once their breaths had come ragged, now their lungs drew deeper. Where once their limbs had faltered, now muscles burned but did not break. Their bellies still ached with emptiness, but the fire in their blood dulled the hunger's edge. The 9 began to understand. The dragon's gift was not only strength, but endurance. By midday, they reached a narrow pass. Jagged cliffs rose on both sides, the wind shrieking through like a horn. Shell halted suddenly, crouching low. His eyes tracked movement above, shadows against the white. "Scouts!" he hissed. Figures appeared on the ridges, wrapped in furs, carrying spears and shields. Imperial soldiers, a dozen at least, perhaps more. Their eyes caught the strange sight below. 9 men dragging a skull vast as a house through the storm. The horn sounded, long and cruel. Eric raised his hand, signaling the others to the sled. "Defend it. We don't lose the skull." Bjorn's grin split wide. "Good. I was growing bored." The enemy descended like wolves from the cliffs, snow spraying under their boots. Spears flew. One struck Sten's shoulder, glancing from his scale mail with a spark. The blacksmith only grunted, yanked it free, and swung his hammer with a roar. Bjorn charged, his axe cleaving through a man and biting into the haft of another's spear. Blood sprayed hot against the snow. His rune flared on the weapon's head, the rune of giants and raw power. Thurisaz, the rune of giants and raw power. Thurisaz, the rune of fury, glowing red as if the dragon's fire itself poured through his arms. Chell loosed arrows in quick succession, each fang-tipped shaft finding a throat or eye. His rune, the rune of storm and hail. Hagalaz, the rune of storm and hail. Hagalaz, rune of storm, flared blue as the wind curved his shots true. Torvald, youngest, shielded the sled with trembling arms. A soldier's blade rang against his scale plate, but did not pierce. The boy's eyes widened as the rune on his shield, the rune of harvest and cycles. Yera, the rune of harvest and cycles. Yera, rune of renewal, glowed green. With a cry half fear, half triumph, he thrust his sword and spilled his first man's blood. Ulfr waded through the melee like a wolf among sheep, each swing of his axe breaking shield and bone alike. Rurik darted behind him, whispering words that rose into screams. The enemy faltered, ears bleeding, as his rune burned bright with fire. Eric fought at the center, his sword a beacon in the storm. His rune, the rune of justice and victory. Tiwaz, the rune of justice and victory. Tiwaz, rune of justice, glowed steady, unyielding, a lodestar for the others. He cut clean, each strike purposeful, never wasted. Around him the battle bent, the nine moving as though one body. The Imperials faltered. The snow ran red. Those still standing turned and fled, stumbling up the ridge with terror in their eyes. They whispered to each other as they vanished, "Dragons! The dead dragon walks." The nine stood in the snow, steaming breath rising like smoke from forges. Not one had fallen. Not one had bent. Leaf spat blood and grinned. If word of this spreads, we'll be more than men in their eyes. Skald planted his spear in the ground, his voice carrying through the storm like a chant. Not men, not beasts, but sons. Sons of the last dragon. They pulled the sled onward, and though the skull weighed as much as a hall, they dragged it with renewed strength. Every glance at the eye sockets, empty yet somehow watchful, reminded them. The dragon's fire burned in their veins now. At night they camped beneath an overhang. The storm masked their fire, and Sten placed 9 runes around the camp, each glowing faintly in the dark. When they slept, dreams came. Each man dreamed of wings, of fire, of flight over endless snow, but the dreams were not all the same. Some saw light, others shadow. Some saw freedom, others chains. The dragon's gift was not simple. It was power, and power had its own hunger. When dawn came, they rose heavy with visions, but united still. Eric broke the silence. We live, we fight, and we do not turn back. Let the Empire whisper our names with fear. Let our kin speak them with hope. We are the Dragon Brotherhood now, and no mountain, no storm, no army will break us. The others bowed heads, whether in prayer or oath none could say. The ropes were taken up once more, and the descent continued. The skull watched over them as they went, vast and grinning, its fangs bared in eternal defiance. The sons of the last dragon walked into legend. Chapter 5 Dash. The Frozen Descent. The mountains did not welcome them. For 3 days the 9 dragged the dragon's skull through the passes, and each day the storm grew harsher, as though the peaks themselves sought to bury the relic forever. Snow fell in endless sheets, erasing their trail, filling their lungs with ice. Ropes cut raw into their palms. The sled groaned with every turn, threatening to split. Still they pressed on. At night they huddled in shallow caves or beneath jutting stone, their fire small, their food gone. Yet none wasted breath on complaint. Hunger no longer crippled them. The dragon's fire dulled its teeth. But the mountain had other trials. On the 4th day, the slope cracked. They heard it first as a whisper, the groan of snow shifting high above. Shell froze mid-step, his bow half raised. "Avalanche!" he hissed. Then the world thundered. A wall of white roared down the cliffside, swallowing stone and pine alike. The 9 leapt to the sled, driving their shoulders into it. "Hold!" Eric bellowed. "If the skull goes, we all go." The avalanche struck like the fist of a god. Snow slammed against their backs, ripping men from their feet. Bjorn roared and dug his heels into the ice, muscles bulging as he held the rope. Ulfr planted his axe into stone, the chain of the sled wrapped around his arm until the steel cut flesh. Torvald clung to him, his small frame nearly swept away. The skull lurched, half buried, ropes straining to breaking. Sten swung his hammer into the ground, driving iron into stone to anchor them. Rurik shouted words none understood, his voice cutting through the thunder like flame through smoke. The avalanche raged past, a river of snow and stone, until at last it thinned and stilled, leaving the pass unrecognizable. The 9 stood panting, half-buried, ropes biting their flesh. Yet the sled had not moved. The skull remained. Bjorn spat a mouthful of snow and laughed. "The mountain will have to do better." They dug themselves out and carried on. The air thinned, each breath like swallowing knives. Yet their legs did not falter. The dragon's gift drove them. Their blood was fire, their lungs bellows. Where another war band would have perished in the high frost, the 9 endured. But the mountain was not done testing them. On the 6th night, as the fire burned low, wolves came. Their eyes glowed red in the dark, dozens circling at the edge of the camp. The beasts were gaunt with hunger, ribs showing through matted fur. A single wolf might have been no danger, but a pack this size was death even for seasoned warriors. Leif rose first, sword in hand, his grin wolfish to match. At last, a welcome party. The wolves surged. They came silent but swift, shadows across the snow. Arrows from Kjell's bow cut down the first wave. Bjorn met the next with his axe, splitting skulls in sprays of black blood. Ulfr fought beside him, his axe rising and falling like a woodcutter at work, each blow final. Torvald stood at the sled, shield raised. A wolf leapt for his throat, and the boy's rune flared green. His shield shone like spring leaves, and the beast struck it as though against stone. Torvald's sword pierced its heart, and for the first time he did not flinch. Rurik's voice rose above the snarls, a chant that set the wolves whimpering mid-leap. Fire licked his blade, though no oil touched it. He carved arcs of flame in the dark, and the pack drew back, uncertain. Then the largest came. A white wolf, taller than a man's shoulder, its fangs long as knives. It lunged straight for Eirik. The leader braced, sword in both hands. The wolf's weight slammed into him, bearing him to the ground. Its jaws snapped for his face, but his rune blazed with steady light, the rune of justice and victory. Tiwaz, the rune of justice and victory. Tiwaz, and his sword thrust upward. Steel met throat. The beast fell limp across him. The rest of the pack faltered. Skald stepped forward, spear raised, and his voice carried like thunder. "Begone! The sons of the last dragon do not break!" The wolves fled into the night. Silence returned, broken only by their ragged breaths. Around them lay bodies steaming in the snow. Blood stained the white ground black. Torvald lowered his shield, chest heaving. His eyes were wide, but no longer afraid. "I killed one," he whispered, as though the words themselves were proof of life. Ulfr clapped him on the back. "Then you are no boy now." The days blurred into a long descent of stone and storm. The Empire's scouts no longer followed. Word of the battle at the pass had spread. Whispers of 9 men clad in dragon fire ran ahead of them like wildfire. Farmers left offerings of bread and mead in the snow where they had passed, though the 9 took nothing, wary of drawing the Empire's eye to their kin. At last the mountain broke. The cliffs gave way to rolling hills, and beyond them the valley of their homeland. Smoke rose from villages, some friendly, some black with ruin. Farther still lay the glint of their city, its walls scarred, its towers broken. They stopped at the ridge, staring down. The skull loomed behind them, its hollow eyes fixed on the valley like a second sun. Eric spoke, his voice steady, though his heart burned. "We went into the mountain as dying men. We came down as something else. The Empire believes us ash. Tomorrow they will see fire instead." The others tightened their grips on ropes and weapons. Their runes pulsed faintly in the twilight, answering his words. Together they dragged the skull into the valley. The frozen descent was ended. The war for their home was about to begin. Chapter 6. The Blacksmith's Oath. The valley lay quiet beneath a pale dawn. The 9 had dragged the dragon's skull into the ruins of a half-burned village, its houses charred by imperial fire. Smoke still lingered, weeks old, but the enemy had long since marched on. Only ghosts remained, and the 9 with their prize. They found the smithy half collapsed, its roof fallen, but its forge intact. Sten Stoneborn stood in the blackened doorway, his hammer slung across his back. He touched the anvil, still cold, still waiting. His thick fingers brushed ash from the iron, and his lips moved in a whisper none could hear. Eric joined him. "Can it be done?" Sten turned, his heavy face lit by the weak morning light. "Steel remembers the hand that shapes it. Bone remembers the beast it served. And dragon scale—" His voice dropped to reverence. "Dragon scale remembers fire. Yes, it can be done. But it will not be smithing. It will be oath." They rebuilt the forge first. Beams were raised, stones stacked, bellows mended with scraps of leather. Sten directed, the others obeyed, for here his word was law. By nightfall the forge roared again, fed by pine and resin. The flames leapt higher than any had seen, as if eager for the task. The skull watched from the hall across the square, mounted against a wall of stone. Its hollow eyes reflected the forge light, so that it seemed to approve, or to judge. Sten worked without rest. He laid scales across the anvil, sparks bursting as his hammer fell. He ground dragon bone into powder, mixing it with molten steel until the metal sang with a voice not its own. Runes were carved into each plate and blade, glowing faintly as though inked with starlight. The others watched, awed and silent. They saw not just craft, but ritual. Each strike of Sten's hammer seemed to echo in their bones. Each hiss of quenched steel sent fire through their veins. The forge became a temple, and Sten its priest. One by one, the weapons and armor were born. For Eirik Ironhand, a broad sword with a fuller deep as a river, its hilt bound in dragon hide. On his breastplate, Sten carved the rune of justice and victory. Tiwaz, the rune of justice and victory. Tiwaz, rune of justice. When Eirik raised it, the rune glowed steady and calm, a lodestar. For Bjorn Bearbreaker, a great axe, its head forged from fused claw and steel, its edge hungry as flame. His scale mail shimmered crimson, and his rune, the rune of giants and raw power, Thurisaz, the rune of giants and raw power. Thurisaz blazed red when his roar shook the air. For Skald the Wise, a dragon-bone spear inlaid with runes along its shaft, each a verse of power. His emerald cloak was bound with scale clasps, and his rune, the rune of wisdom and voice, Ansuz, the rune of wisdom and voice. Ansuz glowed when his voice carried over the din of battle. For Rurik Flameeye, a curved blade forged with a shard of fang in its spine. His helm bore horn-like ridges, and his rune, the rune of wealth and fire, Fehu, the rune of wealth and fire, Fehu, glimmered gold, fire flickering along the blade when he whispered chants. For Kjell the Outcast, a bow strung with sinew, its frame strengthened with dragon bone. Arrows tipped with fangs lay in his quiver, runes etched along each shaft. His rune, the rune of storm and hail, Hagalaz, the rune of storm and hail, Hagalaz, shimmered coal blue whenever the storm answered him. For Steen Stoneborn, his hammer reforged, dragon tooth head banded in steel, haft wrapped in scale. His armor was thick and black. His rune, the rune of need and endurance, Nothiz, the rune of need and endurance, Nothiz, burning orange as he struck the anvil, or an enemy's skull. For Torvald the Stag, a longsword light but unyielding, its blade pearlescent with scale shards. His round shield bore the rune of harvest and cycles, Jera, the rune of harvest and cycles. Jera, which flared green as spring when he raised it against the foe. For Ulfr Bloodfang, a double-bitted axe with edges gleaming dark red, heavy yet swift in his scarred hands. His armor was jagged, scale overlapping like wolf's hide. His rune, the rune of death and rebirth. Iwaz, the rune of death and rebirth. Iwaz, glowing deep crimson in the thick of battle. For Leif Stormborn, a curved sea blade, wave-shaped with sapphire scales on his mail. His rune, the rune of water and flow. Laguz, the rune of water and flow. Laguz pulsed blue when water or storm raged, guiding his strikes as though the tide itself bore his hand. When at last the nine stood in full armor, the forge fell silent. Sparks dimmed. Only the glow of their runes lit the hall, each man shining with his own hue, red, gold, green, blue, white. They looked at each other and saw not only brothers, but legends made flesh. Sten set down his hammer and spoke. These are not tools. These are oaths hammered into iron. If ever you raise them against the innocent, the runes will fade. If ever you break faith with one another, the fire will leave you. But if you stand as brothers, nothing under sun or snow will break these arms. The nine lowered their weapons in salute. Eirik stepped forward and clasped Sten's arm. By your hand we are made whole. By the dragon's gift we are made more. and by our oath we are bound forever." Skald raised his spear and intoned, voice ringing in the hall. "Steel for the strong, fire for the faithful, bone for the brother, rune for the road. 9 we were, and 9 we remain, sons of the last dragon, sworn in flame." Their runes pulsed bright, answering the words as if alive. The dragon's skull glowed faintly in the forge's reflection, its hollow eyes watching. From that night, the Empire would no longer face weary soldiers. They would face the Dragon Brotherhood, clad in scales and fire, their oaths bound in steel and rune, and the world would remember their names. Chapter 7. The Brotherhood Forged. The forge fires had burned low, but the hall still glowed with a strange light. 9 men stood in their new armor, each plate and weapon gleaming with the memory of dragon's flame. Outside, snow fell silent over the village ruins, muffling the world. Inside, the skull of the last dragon loomed above them, its hollow eyes watching, its fangs bare. They gathered at a rough stone table Sten had dragged into place. The surface was scarred with hammer marks, but he had carved a circle into it with the point of his knife, a ring without beginning or end. Upon that circle, each man laid his weapon: sword, axe, spear, hammer, bow. 9 blades of fire and bone, glowing faintly with runes like stars caught in steel. Eirik stood at the head, though the circle gave no head to stand at. His armor shimmered silver with crimson edges, his sword steady in the firelight. "Brothers," he said, voice carrying the weight of command and something greater, belief. "We went into the mountain as men broken, as soldiers without an army. We came down carrying the heart of fire. Now we stand not as stragglers, but as something new. Tonight we choose what we are." Bjorn leaned forward, grinning under his beard. His crimson scales caught the fire like embers. "What we are? We are wolves with iron hides. We are the nightmare of emperors. We are death given steel." "No," Skald said, shaking his head. His emerald cloak flowed down his shoulders, his spear humming faintly. "Death is a void. We are not void. We are fire. Fire can burn, but it can also warm. It can destroy, but it can also protect. The sagas will not remember us only for who we kill, but for who we shield." Ulfr spat onto the stone, his scarred hands gripping his axe. "Sagas won't save a man when the Empire's noose is around his neck, but axes will, better to be feared than forgotten." Torvald, youngest, raised his shield. His rune pulsed faintly green, light spilling across his face like dawn. Feared, yes, but also loved. If we are to be fire, let us be fire for our people. Let the Empire tremble, but let our kin look at us and know they are safe. A murmur rippled through the circle. Even Ulfr's stern eyes softened for a moment, seeing the boy's earnestness. Rurik Flameye's voice cut sharp. "Safe? There is no safe. The dragon gave us hunger, a hunger to fight, to burn. You feel it. I see it in your eyes. We cannot hide it. We cannot deny it. All we can do is direct it. Aim it at the Empire, and perhaps the world will call us saviors instead of monsters." Kjell snorted, resting his bow against his knee. "And what if the world does call us monsters? Let it, as long as we kill our enemies first." Leif laughed, tossing a coin across his knuckles. "Monsters or heroes will be legends, and I'd rather die a legend than live a forgotten fisherman." Eirik raised a hand, silencing them. His gaze swept the circle, one man at a time. We may be wolves, fire, monsters, or saviors, but above all, we are brothers. That is the oath. Not one of us stands alone, not in battle, not in hunger, not in death. If the Empire faces us, they face 9. If one of us falls, we all bear the weight. That is the Brotherhood. He drew a knife, the same his father had once given him. Without hesitation, he cut his palm and pressed the blade into the circle's stone. Blood dripped across the carved ring. By blood we are bound. One by one, the others followed. Bjorn's laugh turned solemn as his blood joined the ring. Skald hummed a chant as his drop fell. Rurik's cut smoked faintly as though fire ran in his veins. Kjell muttered a curse. Sten pressed his broad palm firm, leaving a smear that sank deep into the groove. Torvald's blood was bright as spring. Ulfr's was dark and thick, but steady. Leif, grinning, added his last, and the circle closed. The blood did not fade. It shimmered faintly, glowing like the runes on their weapons. The stone drank it in, and the carved ring lit red for a heartbeat, before fading to a scar only the 9 could see. Skald spoke in a voice like thunder. Blood binds us, fire shapes us. 9 we were, 9 we are, 9 we remain. Sons of the last dragon, bound until the end of days. The skull above them seemed to catch the forge light, its empty sockets glowing faintly, as though the dragon itself bore witness to their vow. Silence followed. Not empty silence, but full, as if the hall itself held its breath. Then Bjorn broke it with a booming laugh. Well, if we are sworn, let us swear with deeds. Who do we kill first? Eric allowed himself a small smile. The Empire holds our city. They think it theirs. Tomorrow, they will learn who truly rules it. The others roared agreement, slamming fists on the stone. The sound rolled through the ruins like thunder carried by the storm. That night, the 9 feasted not on meat or bread, for they had none, but on fire and oath. They sat beneath the dragon's skull, armor gleaming, runes glowing, and for the first time since their army fell, they felt not like hunted men, but hunters. The Brotherhood was forged, and in the dark beyond the walls, Imperial patrols marched, unaware that 9 men had risen from the grave to become legends. Chapter 8. First blood, first fire. The night was black as tar, the sky smothered in snow clouds. No moon, no stars. Only the breath of winter. At the edge of the valley, an Imperial outpost squatted against the cliffside. Timber walls rimmed with spikes, a watchtower crowned with a single torch. Inside, perhaps 50 soldiers slept or drank by the fire, their banners hanging limp. To them, the war was already won, but the 9 knew better. Eric crouched in the drifts, his armor cloaked in snow. He studied the walls, the rhythm of the guards, the way the torchlight painted blind spots across the yard. His eyes gleamed faintly with the rune of justice and victory. Tiwaz, the rune of justice and victory. Tiwaz, steady and sure. We strike fast, he whispered. Silence first, fire after. Leave none alive to rally. Bjorn grinned, frost crusting his beard. Silence is not my gift, Eirik. Then you'll have your turn when the walls fall, Eric said, and Bjorn's grin only widened. Kjell slipped into the dark ahead, bow strung, steps soundless. He was shadow upon shadow, his rune the rune of storm and hail, Hagalaz the rune of storm and hail. Hagalaz flickering blue as the storm answered him. The first arrow whispered through the night, and a watchman on the tower fell without a sound. Another shaft followed, and the second torch-bearer crumpled. "Path is clear," Shell murmured when he rejoined them, snow dusting his hood. They moved. The 9 flowed from the drifts like wraiths, slipping through gaps in the wall. Steen and Ulfr lifted the gate's timber bar as though it were no heavier than a log, setting it aside without a groan. Inside, the camp still slept, firelight flickering on tents and crates. Eric raised his hand. Now. Rurik stepped forward, his curved blade already glowing faintly. He whispered words none of the others knew, and sparks flared from his lips. His rune, the rune of wealth and fire. Fehu, the rune of wealth and fire. Fehu shone gold, and the sparks leapt to the nearest tent. Fire blossomed, hungry and sudden, racing up canvas and rope. The silence shattered. Men stumbled from their beds, shouting, reaching for spears, and Bjorn crashed into them with a roar. His axe blazed crimson, the rune of giants and raw power. Thurisaz, the rune of giants and raw power. Thurisaz glowing so bright it seemed molten. The first soldier he struck split from shoulder to hip, blood spraying across the snow. Skald raised his spear and his voice together, chanting in the old tongue. His rune, the rune of wisdom and voice. Ansus, the rune of wisdom and voice. Ansus burned green, and the words carried through the outpost like a horn blast. Panic seized the Imperials. Some froze mid-step, others dropped weapons as though their hands had turned to ice. Leif vaulted a crate, his sea-blade cutting 2 men in one sweep. His rune, the rune of water and flow. Lagoose, the rune of water and flow. Lagoose pulsed blue, his movements as fluid as tide water. He laughed as he struck, his voice wild, carrying over the flames. Torvald planted his shield before the sled they had dragged to block the gate. Arrows rained at him, but each struck and glanced aside. His rune, the rune of harvest and cycles. Yera, the rune of harvest and cycles. Jera glowing bright green. He pushed forward, sword flashing, the boy no longer trembling but steady as a stag in rut. Ulfr carved a path with brutal swings, his double axe cleaving men and timber alike. His rune, the rune of death and rebirth. Iwaz, the rune of death and rebirth. Iwaz glowed blood red, and with each strike he seemed to grow heavier, more unstoppable, like death itself made flesh. Sten swung his hammer with both hands, bone and steel meeting flesh and armor. His rune, the rune of need and endurance. Nathaz, the rune of need and endurance. Nathaz glimmered orange, each strike ringing like an anvil. The air itself seemed to reverberate with his blows. Shell picked targets calmly from behind the chaos, each fang-tipped arrow finding a throat or an eye. His rune pulsed cold and sure, every shaft flying true even through smoke and fire. And Rurik sang fire. His blade swept arcs of flame, tents collapsing in sheets of sparks behind him. His eyes burned like coals, and men fled at the sight alone. Through it all, Eric stood at the heart of the storm. His sword cut clean, his voice steady, calling orders that turned 9 men into 1. Left, shield the gate. Push them into the fire. Hold the line. His rune glowed steady white, his calm unshaken even, as blood drenched the snow. Within minutes, the outpost was no longer an outpost. It was a pyre. The last of the Imperials tried to flee through the gates, but found only Torvald and Ulfr barring the way. Their shields held, their axes rose, and the fugitives fell one by one. None escaped. When the fire dimmed and silence returned, the 9 stood in the courtyard, breath steaming, runes glowing faint. The ground was littered with corpses, the walls blackened with flame. The Empire's banner smoldered in the snow, torn and trampled. Bjorn wiped blood from his axe and grinned. 50 men, gone like kindling. By the gods, I feel alive. You are alive, Skald said gravely. And because of that, a saga has begun. Tonight, the Empire learns that death does not end with the battlefield. Tonight, they will whisper of us. Leif kicked a corpse and laughed. Whisper, they'll howl. Eric looked to the dragon skull that loomed beyond the walls, lit by the fire's glow. Its empty sockets burned with reflected flame, and in them he saw their future, not just raiders, not just rebels, but legends. No whispers, he said. Names. They will know us by name. Sons of the last dragon, the Dragon Brotherhood. The others roared agreement, their voices carrying over the night. And as the flames consumed the outpost, the first tale of the Brotherhood spread on the storm. Soldiers would whisper it by their fires. Villagers would sing it with hope. An empire would tremble in its sleep. 9 men had risen from the mountain. 9 men had become dragons in flesh. The war had begun. Chapter 9. Flames in the North. The outpost was ash by dawn. Its walls smoldered, its banners torn, its garrison nothing but corpses beneath snow. Smoke climbed the sky like a black spear, visible for miles. By the 3rd day, word had reached every hamlet and farm in the valley. The dead had returned. 9 warriors, clad in dragon scales, had risen from the mountain and set fire to the Empire's outpost. Some called them revenants. Others whispered the gods had sent them. And in the taverns where fear had reigned, mugs were lifted for the first time in months. But the Empire also heard. 2 weeks after the raid, a column of soldiers marched into the valley. Not 50 this time, 500. Their commander wore a cloak of wolf pelts, his helm crowned with bronze. He laughed at the stories, called them peasant lies, and ordered the villages scoured. That night, he laughed no more. The column moved through a pine forest, torches bobbing like fireflies. The snow was deep, the march slow, but above them, unseen in the dark, 9 figures moved silent as owls. Eric gave the signal. Hjell loosed first, his arrows whispering death into the torchbearers. Darkness fell on the column like a blanket. Soldiers shouted, stumbling, their formation breaking. Then Leif crashed down from a ridge, his curved sea blade flashing blue in the torchlight. He cut 3 men before his feet touched snow. Bjorn roared, axe blazing crimson, his rune flaring as he smashed into the flank. Sten followed, hammer ringing like thunder on steel. Ulfr carved a path through the center, his axe splitting shields as though they were bark. Rurik's voice rose in a shriek of fire, his blade igniting tents and cloaks alike. Men screamed as flames licked their ranks. Skald's chants echoed through the trees, sowing panic in every heart. Torvald stood guard over the sled that carried the dragon skull, his shield glowing green as arrows shattered harmlessly against it. His young voice rose with theirs, steady now, no longer trembling. And Eric cut like a storm through the chaos, his rune shining white. He gave no wasted strike, no wild swing. Every motion bent the battle toward his brothers, as if the dragon's fire guided his hand. By dawn, the 500 were scattered corpses among the pines. A handful fled, stumbling into the hills. They carried no loot, no victory, only a story. That story spread like plague. Villagers whispered it as they baked bread, as they spun wool, as they rocked their children to sleep. The Dragon Brotherhood. The sons of the last dragon. 9 men who could not die, whose runes glowed in battle, whose blades burned with fire and storm. The Empire called them demons, rebels, abominations. Their commanders told soldiers that the stories were lies, but still the men muttered by the fire, afraid of shadows in the trees. Some swore they had seen dragon wings in the smoke, others that the skull itself floated above the 9 like a ghost. Fear does not need truth. It needs only a spark. And the Brotherhood gave it flame. The raids continued. One night, a caravan of supplies vanished into smoke. Its wagons overturned, its escort of soldiers left in pieces. The Empire found only claw marks carved into the wood, though no beast lived large enough to make them. Another dawn, a watchtower collapsed in fire. Its guards found scorched, though no oil had been spilled. The villagers swore they had seen a dragon's shadow pass across the snow at sunrise. And in the fjords, Leif led an attack from the water. Imperial longboats burned, their wreckage washing ashore. Survivors swore they had seen men walking on waves, armor glowing blue as the tide. Wherever the Brotherhood struck, no garrison felt safe. But victories had their cost. The fire inside them burned hotter with each battle. Rurik muttered in his sleep, eyes glowing faint. Bjorn grew restless, hungry for blood even when no enemies stood before him. Torvald, though brave, looked pale at times, as if the dragon's gift weighed heavier on the young. Eric saw it all. At night, when the skull loomed above their camp, he set his hand against its brow. "We will not be consumed," he whispered. "We are men, not beasts. We are brothers, not monsters." The skull gave no answer, but sometimes in the stillness he swore he felt heat beneath the bone. One evening, as they feasted on deer roasted over pine fire, Skald rose. His voice carried soft but sure. "The Empire thought the North broken. They thought us dead, our people slaves. But tonight they fear us. They dream of us. They cannot march without wondering if we wait in the snow. Brothers, this is more than war. This is Saga." He raised his spear, its runes glowing green in the firelight. And sagas live forever. Bjorn lifted his axe and bellowed, "Then let them choke on our saga." The others roared in answer, striking weapons against shields, sparks flying. The sound rolled through the valley like thunder. Somewhere far away, another imperial horn answered. An army was coming. But for the first time since their army fell, the 9 did not fear. They welcomed it. For they were no longer soldiers. They were the Dragon Brotherhood. And the North burned with their fire. Chapter 10. The Great Clash. The Empire did not send scouts this time. It did not send columns or caravans. It sent an army. From the high ridge, the Brotherhood looked down on a sea of spears. 2,000 men at least, banners snapping, shields glinting, their lines winding like a serpent across the snow. At their head rode a commander in gilded mail, his helm crowned with antlers of bronze. Bjorn spat into the wind. "Finally, prey worth the hunt." "Prey," Krell muttered, stringing his bow. "That prey could drown us in its piss." Eric's jaw was set. Numbers mean little if the pass holds. The mountain will fight with us, if we use it well. Below them, the narrow gorge cut between cliffs like the slit of a blade. Only a dozen men could march abreast. If they held here, numbers would count for little. But if the line broke, the city would fall. Sten planted his hammer in the snow. Then we do not break. The empire advanced. The first wave came with shields locked, a wall of iron. Arrows blackened the sky. Torvald raised his shield high, his rune the rune of harvest and cycles, Jera the rune of harvest and cycles, Jera glowing green, and the shafts shattered against it like rain against stone. "Loose!" Eric roared. Kjell's fang-tipped arrows sang from the ridge, striking through helms, piercing throats. Leif hurled spears from the flank, each finding its mark as if guided by tide. Then the shield wall reached them. Bjorn was first to meet it, his crimson rune the rune of giants and raw power. Thurisaz the rune of giants and raw power. Thurisaz blazing. His axe fell like a storm, cleaving men and shields together. Blood spattered his beard and his laughter shook the gorge. Ulfr fought beside him, his own axe glowing red, every swing a death knell. Together they held the front like wolves snapping at a herd. Sten swung his hammer, breaking spears, crushing helms. Sparks leapt with each strike, as though the anvil fire still lived in the weapon. "Hold the line," he thundered, and the line held. Rurik darted behind them, his rune, the rune of wealth and fire. Fehu, the rune of wealth and fire. Fehu, burning gold. His chants filled the gorge, and his blade trailed fire through the press. Men screamed, torches leaping from their hands, their fear spreading faster than flame. Skald's voice rose higher still, his rune, the rune of wisdom and voice. Ansu's, the rune of wisdom and voice. Ansu's glowing emerald. His chant became command, his words weaving panic through the enemy's ranks. Soldiers turned to flee, stumbling over their own fallen, only to be cut down by Leif's flashing blade. Torvald, youngest, held the flank with shield high, his rune shining steady green. He pushed back men twice his size, his sword cutting true, his breath steady. Fear no longer lived in his eyes. And Eirik was everywhere. His rune, the rune of justice and victory. Tiwaz, the rune of justice and victory. Tiwaz glowed white, his sword flashing in arcs of justice. His voice cut through the roar of battle, guiding them, binding them. He was the calm in the storm, and the storm obeyed. Wave after wave crashed against them. The gorge ran red with blood, the snow trampled into mud and flesh. For hours they fought, until arms ached and shields splintered. But still they stood. At last the Imperial commander himself advanced, bronze antlers gleaming. He rode a black stallion, a great warhammer in his hand. Around him marched his chosen guard, heavy-armored, shields high. Bjorn spat blood and grinned. "That one's mine." "Hold your lust," Eric warned. "We strike together." The commander raised his hammer, his voice booming. "Face me, demons, face me, if you dare." The Brotherhood roared as one and surged forward. Bjorn's axe met the commander's hammer with a crash that shook the cliffs. Sparks flew. Ulfr struck from the side, but the guard closed the ranks, shields locking. Sten's hammer rang against bronze, breaking one guard's helm clean through. Rurik flung fire into their ranks, flames curling around steel. Skald's chant turned the guards' feet heavy, their arms weak. Kjell's arrows slipped through the smallest gaps, striking eyes and throats. Torvald pushed forward, his shield shining bright as he slammed into the guard, opening a gap. Leif darted through, his sea blade flashing, cutting deep. And Eric's sword found the commander. Bronze antlers met dragon steel. With a single strike, Eric's blade sheared the helm in two. The commander fell, his blood steaming in the snow. The guards faltered. The Empire's line shuddered. And then it broke. The survivors fled, their banners trampled, their dead littering the gorge. Thousands had come. Thousands had fallen. Only a few hundred limped back into the storm, their voices ragged with fear. The Brotherhood stood in the pass, bloodied, breath steaming, their runes glowing faint. Around them lay mountains of corpses, the snow stained red. Bjorn leaned on his axe, laughter booming. 2,000, and still we stand. By the gods, I will never tire of this. Ulfr spat and wiped his blade. Nor will the Empire. They will come again. Stronger. Angrier. Skald planted his spear, his voice weary but resolute. Let them come. The sagas will only grow thicker with each wave. Torvald stood straight, his shield still raised. His face was pale, but his eyes burned. They will not take our city, not while we breathe. Eric looked at each of them, blooded, weary, yet unbroken. He raised his sword high, its rune glowing like a star. We are the wall now, the last wall, and the Empire will break against us again and again, until the world knows our name. The others lifted weapons in answer, their voices rising as one. The Dragon Brotherhood. The cliffs shook with their roar. And far away, in the Empire's camps, soldiers woke in terror, whispering that even their greatest army could not kill 9 men clad in dragon fire. Chapter 11. The Skull in the Hall. The battle in the pass echoed through the valley for weeks. Crows feasted on the Empire's dead. Streams ran red as the thaw carried blood down into the villages. Survivors who had fled spread stories far and wide. 9 men, clad in scales of fire, had broken an army of thousands. The people began to call them more than brothers. They called them saviors, sons of the last dragon. But the 9 knew they could not roam like wanderers forever. An oath demanded a hearth, a saga demanded a hall. And so, with the dragon's skull still lashed to its sled, they climbed to the ruins of an ancient temple. The temple had once been a place of worship, carved into the cliffside above the valley. Its roof had caved in long ago, its columns broken. Snow drifted through gaps in the walls, yet its bones remained strong, like the ribs of some great beast. "This will serve," Eric said, standing in the wide chamber that looked out over the valley. Bjorn snorted, kicking at a broken stone. "Serve for goats, maybe. For men?" Sten laid his hand on the wall, feeling the stone. "It has stood 100 years without care. With our hands it will stand 100 more. This place remembers purpose. We will give it new purpose." And so they worked. For days they cleared rubble, lifted beams, set stones. Their dragon-blooded strength made them more than masons. They were giants. Bjorn carried timbers alone that once would have needed 10 men. Ulfr set boulders as though he were stacking firewood. Leif clambered along the rafters, laughing as he hammered beams into place. Kjell scouted the hills for quarry stone and wild game, his arrows bringing down stags and wolves alike. Torvald fetched water from the spring, his shield strapped even then, refusing to be idle. Rurik inscribed runes into the new walls, his chants giving the hall a weight of power, as though the stone itself bound to their oath. Skald carved sagas into beams, words that would outlast all of them. And at the heart of it all, Sten rebuilt the forge. He raised the anvil again, set the bellows, lit flame from pine resin. Sparks flew, echoing like laughter in the hall. At last, the hall stood whole again. Then came the skull. They dragged it into the temple, setting it against the central wall. The beast's hollow eyes caught the firelight, burning like two suns. Its fangs gleamed white, its brow etched with age. The 9 stood before it in silence, as though in the presence of a god. Eric broke the quiet. This skull is not a trophy. It is a witness. When we swore our oath, the dragon heard us. Now it shall watch us. Forever. They raised the skull high with ropes and beams, setting it into the wall above the hearth. When the fire roared, its sockets glowed, and it seemed to grin, defiant, eternal. Bjorn lifted his axe in salute. Now it feels like home. At the hall's center they set a round table of stone. Sten carved it from a single slab, its surface polished smooth. Around it they placed 9 seats, equal in height, none above another. Upon the table they engraved their runes, each glowing faint when a brother set his hand upon it. "This is where we counsel," Eric said, "not as chieftain and men, but as equals. Here, no voice outweighs another. Here we are brothers, bound by blood and fire." They placed their weapons upon the table. Sword, axe, spear, bow, hammer. Each rune pulsing in rhythm. For a moment, the hall itself seemed to hum, as though the skull approved. Skald rose, lifting his spear, his voice ringing off the stone. "In battle we are one wall, in oath we are one heart. 9 men, 9 runes, 1 brotherhood. Let this hall stand as our witness, let this skull guard our deeds, and let the world remember the sons of the last dragon." The others echoed his cry, their voices booming until the walls shook. That night they feasted. Leif had raided a supply caravan, dragging barrels of mead back with him. They roasted deer, sang loud, and slammed fists upon the stone table. For the first time since the battlefield, they laughed without bitterness. Torvald stood to speak, his voice unsteady but strong. "We were born again in hunger and frost. We bled together, fought together, survived together. And tonight we build together. This hall is not ours alone. It belongs to all who look to us for hope." Even Ulfr, gruff and scarred, raised his mug at that. "Well said, boy. Well said." The fire burned low. One by one, the brothers drifted into sleep upon benches and furs. Only Eirik remained awake, sitting before the skull. Its sockets glowed faintly with the last of the embers. "We honor you," he whispered. "We carry you in steel and blood. Guard us, as we guard our people." For a moment, perhaps only a trick of the fire, he thought he saw the skull's fangs gleam brighter and heat brush his cheek. Eric did not smile, but his eyes shone with certainty. The hall was theirs now. The Brotherhood was no longer a band of survivors. They were an order, and the dragon watched over them. Chapter 12 The saga begins. The hall smelled of smoke and pine, of steel and mead. Firelight danced across the dragon's skull, its hollow sockets glowing faint as if alive. The 9 sat around the stone table, weapons resting before them, mugs in hand. For the first time since the mountain, the world felt still. Eric leaned back, eyes on the fire. The empire lies broken in the north, its armies shattered, its outposts ash. Our people breathe free again, for a while at least. Bjorn raised his mug. A while is long enough for drinking. He tipped it back, mead running down his beard, and slammed it on the table. 9 men broke their back, brothers. 9. Let them choke on that tale until they gag. Skald smiled faintly. They will not gag. They will sing. The saga's already spread. Farmers whisper of us as they till their fields. Children carve runes of dragons on their toys. Even the Empire's soldiers fear shadows in the trees. Good, Ulfr growled. Fear keeps them out of our valley. Fear buys us time. Leif leaned forward, eyes dancing. Time for what? To grow fat and dull in this hall, to drink until the Empire finds its courage again. Time to prepare, Steen rumbled, polishing his hammer. Steel dulls without use. Walls crumble without care. This hall is a beginning, not an ending. Torvald nodded, young face fierce in the firelight. We are not done. We swore to fight for our people, not just ourselves. If the Empire rises again, we meet them. If other enemies come, we meet them too. Rurik's gaze burned in the shadows, his rune glowing faint gold. Other enemies will come. I have seen it in dreams. The dragon's fire has awoken more than strength in us. It has stirred the old powers. I hear wings in the night. I see eyes in the dark that are not men's. A hush fell over the table. Even Bjorn's grin faded. What do you mean? Eric asked. Rurik's voice was low, like the crackle of embers. The dragon we found was not alone. Its kin once ruled the skies. Some were slain, some buried, some sleeping, and not all will welcome us wearing their brother's scales. The fire popped. The skull on the wall loomed large, its fangs gleaming. Shell broke the silence with a bitter laugh. So we've traded one empire for another war. Wolves to the north, dragons to the sky. There's no end to it. No, Skald said softly. There is no end. That is the nature of sagas. Each victory births another trial. Each fire lights another shadow. Eric's eyes moved around the circle, taking in each of his brothers. Then we do what we have always done. We stand together. Whatever comes, empire or beast, storm or fire, we meet it as one. Their hands met upon the table, 9 palms over 9 runes. The stone hummed faintly, the blood oath etched into it glowing once more. The Dragon Brotherhood, they said in unison. That night, they feasted until their laughter shook the hall. Bjorn roared songs so loud the rafters trembled. Leif juggled knives until Torvald nearly fainted from laughing. Skald sang verses of their battle in the pass, his voice carrying into the night. Even Ulfr cracked a smile as mead warmed his belly. But when sleep came, dreams followed. Eric dreamed of wings blotting out the sun. Bjorn dreamed of fire raging higher than mountains. Torvald dreamed of standing alone in a storm, his shield breaking. Rurik dreamed of eyes watching from beneath the ice. And Skald dreamed of a saga with no end, only pages unwritten. They woke before dawn, silent, each keeping his visions to himself. The sun rose weak over the valley, glinting on snow and smoke. Villagers gathered outside the hall, gazing up at the dragon's skull. Some crossed themselves, others whispered prayers. Children pointed at the glowing runes carved into the stones and called them blessings. Eirik stepped outside with his brothers, their armor gleaming in the pale light. The people parted for them, awe in every eye. An old woman bowed low. "Sons of the last dragon," she said, "guardians of the north." Torvald looked at Eirik, pride warring with humility. "We are not kings," he whispered. "No," Eirik answered. "We are brothers. That is enough." The crowd cheered as they walked among them. Hope had returned to the valley, fragile but real. And above, unseen in the pale sky, a shadow wheeled once before vanishing into cloud. That evening, the 9 sat once more at their table. The skull loomed behind them, the fire roared before them, and the runes glowed beneath their hands. Skald raised his mug. To the saga we have written. Bjorn raised his axe. To the battles yet to come. Eric lifted his sword, steady as the dawn. To the Brotherhood. To fire and blood. To the last dragon. Their weapons rang together, steel against steel echoing through the hall. And so the first saga of the Dragon Brotherhood ended, not in silence, but in fire, in oath, and in the promise of more. The saga had only just begun.